The alarm goes off. What happened?
Wow. Well, I'd get up at 6:30, feed the kids breakfast, go off to Gourmet for a full day's work until we finish lunch, get in a car at 2 o'clock, go out to see the kids at school, pick them up, bring them back home, do homework for an hour so I could see them, go back to the Food Network, do the 7 o'clock show, be done by 8 o'clock, come home for dinner at 8:15, go back to the Food Network at 9:30 to do the 10 o'clock show, done at 11 o'clock, home at 11:15, crash.
How did you do it? Well, we'll find out.
Chef Sara Moulton spent a decade on Food Network as pioneer of live cooking on TV, while working full-time as executive chef of Gourmet magazine, serving as the culinary director of Good Morning America, writing 2 widely acclaimed cookbooks, and raising 2 children with her music producer husband. We met in her spacious loft in the Chelsea section of Manhattan.
Well, that's an amazingly daunting schedule. And I think we should figure out how you actually managed to do it and do everything, all those 4 different jobs, successfully. So what was your secret?
Well, it was planning, really good planning. I mean, once on weekends, which I actually had off, I would figure out the menu for the whole week, and I would get all the groceries in-house, and I would work up sort of a menu plan. I had a great housekeeper, and she would sort of prep the food up to the point where it would be finished, and then Bill was able to finish it. And I'd figure out schedules with the kids, if I needed the babysitter. It was all planning, and also making sure you can't make dinner unless you have the food in-house to begin with. So I made sure that we had that, because the family dinner part of that was the single most important thing.
But how did the children relate to the fact that their mother was so busy?
Well, what was interesting about the kids, and I made a really concerted effort to do this, I had them on the show about 15 times, both together and separately. So
People do anything to be on television.
Well, they actually, when we started, Ruthie thought she was an actress, and Sammy was sort of a deer caught in the headlights, and then it reversed as they got older. They were 9 and 5 when I started, but they felt like it was their show. So sometimes even they'd come, not when we were taping or not when they were on, but they'd just hang out. And they got to know all the camera guys. It was like they were a member of the family. So somehow it wasn't as bad when they felt like it was their show as much as it was mine.
Well, how about your energy? To keep your energy going consistently from 6:15 in the morning until you go to bed at 11 o'clock at night with virtually no break.
I'll tell you, one of my biggest secrets to this day, I don't know, because now I feel like a slacker, I don't have, a million jobs, is to get 8 hours sleep. I always get 8 hours sleep. Well, roughly 8 hours, not quite. But sleep is really key. And I also learned, you're not going to believe this, how to sleep anywhere at any time during the day. My dad had said when he was in the service, he learned how to do that. You just take a cat nap for 10 minutes. So Pam, my makeup artist, would be doing my hair for both shows at like 5:36, and I would sleep while she was doing my hair, sitting up in the chair. I learned how to sleep standing on the subway. So I took my little cat naps throughout the day, and I could go to sleep, and I could wake up, and I felt refreshed.
Well, what do you say to somebody who's watching right now who is intimidated by a future project, something they've got to do in the next couple months, in terms of doing it well and getting through it?
Well, something I finally learned now that I'm an old person or older person is that don't wait till the last minute. I used to be a complete 11th hourer. I'd wait and write that paper, but now I plan way ahead. If I know I have a project to do in a month, I start now. And I can't tell you how much more relaxed I am now that I plan ahead. I don't wait till the last minute.
How do you think this process of being so busy and juggling the 4 different jobs essentially improved you or helped you to grow as a person?
Well, one of the great things about doing all these jobs is it kept me mentally alert. I had to study. And somehow it's almost like they say, exercising gives you more energy. It doesn't make you tired. Well, having to do all this mental exercise every day, just the planning for work, the cooking the lunch, but also studying, because the 2 live shows, I had to know everything about everything. But just having to study that way, I think, kept me more mentally alert. So it was sort of by doing this work, I stayed sharper. I had more energy. I was smarter.
What did you avoid in terms of eating habits? How did you get exercise? What did you say, I can't do that if I'm keeping this schedule?
Wow, I ate healthy. I've always tried to eat healthy. And certainly the trouble with TV, as you well know, those old 10 pounds. So before I started the 2 live shows, and by the way, I will say I only did this for 8 months, the 2 live shows, and that's another very important part of this equation. I knew there was an end in sight. It was supposed to be maximum 10 months. You can do anything if you know there's going to be a finish line. So, but in preparation, I went to Weight Watchers and lost 10 pounds and just continued to eat very healthy. One of the things you learn on Weight Watchers, I don't know if you've ever done it, is that you bulk up on vegetables and fruits. What could be better? So I tended to eat a lot of vegetables and fruits and just eat light. Did not give up my wine. That was an important part of my day with dinner.
Didn't you drink on the show sometimes?
Oh my goodness, Bill. It was very confusing with the second show because it was supposed to be a variety entertainment show. We had a bunch of guests on and we were supposed to be having a party. So in the beginning they're like, oh, we want you to be drinking and having fun. And then they're like, oh no, it looks like you're all drunk. Stop drinking. So they went back and forth and back and forth. But whether we were drinking openly or drinking privately, we were always drinking because one of the things I discovered is when you have a guest on and they're a little bit nervous, you offer them a glass of wine, and whether they drink it or they don't drink it, just the idea that they have a glass of wine in front of them makes them feel, we're having a party. This is not TV. So, yes.
Well, you talked about what you gained during that period, and during even the longer period of doing the one show, where you still had an enormously busy schedule. Was anything lost as you look back on it? Do you say, well, I gained that experience, I made that money, I had this fame, but I didn't do X?
Well, the didn't do was spend enough time with my family. You know, I just said the most important part of that equation was dinner. And, you know, I did spend an hour in the afternoon. The kids loved getting picked up at their school because there was a limo. So this fancy big blue Cadillac it was called, and the guy who drove it had dreadlocks. He was Jamaican, but he was very elegant. And so they loved this car would pick up and, you know, drive up in front of the school and pick the two of them up, and they'd come back and we'd have fun in the car. And then we'd come home and get the homework started. But I feel like I missed out on certain things. You know, I couldn't necessarily go to the school play. So that is really a heartbreak.
Tell me the value of the family meal during busy times.
We've had family meal for years. I grew up with family meal. My husband grew up with family meal, so it was sort of a no-brainer. And we really started actually because of these two shows. My husband and I always ate dinner together, but when I was doing the two shows, I was like, oh my God, here's another opportunity for me to spend time with the kids when I'm so busy. We must have dinner. And Bill, my husband, said, oh no, Sammy's not ready for prime time. You know, he can't sit still. I said, well, we got to start somewhere, even if he sits here with us for 5 minutes. But what we found is he grew into it. And obviously, I mean, by the time we got to junior high school, everybody looked forward to family meal because we did what you should do, which is everybody gets to talk about their day. So it was a way for us to keep up with what the kids were doing, a way for them to feel important, that we valued how their day had gone, to talk about problems they were having and come up with solutions, plus which we happened to eat some really good food. So that was important too.
Now, before we leave this topic of the busyness, is there anything else you could think of you could say to help somebody who is, again, facing a daunting schedule?
I think when you've got, let's say I was put in a great position with the Food Network and I was given a nice amount of money. That's not always the case, but it was here. I decided that rather than just save all the money, which I certainly made plenty of money, I would hire people to help me. So I got this housekeeper in pretty much all week long, you know, during the work week, so that she could do the dishes and do the laundry. Because my feeling is when I'm home, I have to focus on what's important, and that's the family. So you have to get good help. You know, likewise, I had to trust my sous chef at Gourmet to do the best job she possibly could because I wasn't going to be there all that much. You have to learn to delegate.
How about your husband? How did he feel about all this?
Well, the interesting thing is, Bill, when the Food Network offered me this job, and it was going to be 5 nights a week. It ended up being 4 ultimately, but it was 185 nights a year. When they offered me the job, I went to Bill. This is, as I told you, when the kids, I guess they might have been 8 and 3. It was finally 9 and 5 by the time we started. I said, you know, I can't do this. I'm not going to be around to make dinner and to take care of the kids and to run the house. And he looked at me and he said, no, you must do it. So that's the kind of support I got from him. And when I started doing it, he definitely kicked in. You know, he wasn't the house husband. He worked full time too, but he would go to the school plays. He would make sure dinner got done every night. He would make sure they finished their homework.
And he did it happily.
He did it happily.
Now, take a moment and tell us about your Gourmet job. You know, I was in there shooting all this video of you. Just briefly tell us what that involves, because that's a big job in and of itself.
It is. I work at Gourmet magazine, you know, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I'm the executive chef. I work on the advertising side. When I first started at Gourmet, I worked in the test kitchen, which is editorial. But I morphed into this job. I loved it because I missed restaurants. And what we do in my dining room at Gourmet, which is the center of my job, is we entertain clients, clients being advertisers. So these poor, unsuspecting people, I hope none of them are watching, come in for a lunch. We make the magazine come alive by making food from the magazine, decorating the dining room the same way we would in Gourmet, and having lots of alcohol. So they come in, they have 2 hors d'oeuvres, first course, main course, dessert, lots of beautiful wines. And when they don't know, what happened because they've had all that alcohol, we hit them up for the big ad pages. So that's what we do. But also I do cooking classes. I develop and test recipes for clients. I do cooking demos. I do consulting. We'll send off a gifty poo to get, an edible gifty poo to some client to get their attention. So anything you can do to make a client happy, it's actually all about building relationships. So over the years, I've made friends with a lot of our clients.
Is it difficult to recreate the beautiful recipes in Gourmet
No,
magazine?
because we test our recipes at Gourmet magazine. They really work. And if I'm having a problem, I just run down the hallway to the test kitchen to the person who developed the recipe and say, something's not working here, come show me. So then they come right down and I get a private lesson. But what I love about my job, there's so many things I love about my job, is that most people end up making the same 10 boring recipes. Even if you're a trained chef, you get a little bit stale. But we are forced every week to make new recipes from the magazine and to learn new techniques. So it keeps me so fresh. And we're talking about international recipes, so it's not any one style. So it's really kept me fresh. I mean, back to the mental stimulation. Doing new things, learning new things, trying new techniques keeps you fresh.
What's the last new technique you learned?
Oh, I'm just about to learn a new one. There is a panna cotta. You know what a panna cotta is. It's a wonderful dessert. And we're doing an event in my dining room where I'm going to make this one dessert from the magazine. And instead of being thickened with gelatin, panna cotta is basically cream that's thickened with gelatin and has flavoring in it. Gelatin is an animal-based product. It's thickened with agar-agar, which is a form of seaweed, which is a vegetarian option. I mean, that's not why it was used for this.
Affect the taste?
We're about to find out. I have not had it, but apparently no, it doesn't. But we're going to make this. I've never worked with it before, so it's a whole different new technique. But it has a much lovelier texture. You know how gelatin can be a little bouncy? Apparently, the test kitchen tells me this is really just gets onto your tongue and just melts.
Well, that's interesting. But somebody could taste it and say, nice texture, but it tastes a little bit like Norwegian salmon. We'll find out.
We'll find out.
Tell us about the new show on PBS. What's the objective of the show? Just describe the show for somebody who hasn't seen it.
My new show on public television is Sara's Weeknight Meals. It's my life. It's getting dinner on the table during the work week in a quick and efficient manner, but really fun recipes. Back to people making the same thing, you just bore yourself. So I decided to throw it up and just try different things. Breakfast for dinner, soup for supper, the substantial sandwich. Why not? And what we do 3 entrees per show, and before each show we give you hands-on time, which is all anybody really cares about, and it's usually about 20 minutes. And then the total cooking time, including the hands-on, which is usually never more than an hour. So it's probably 20 minutes of your time to make most of my recipes. And what we also did, I'm on alone for 14 shows, and then we had guests on the other 6, people of different ethnic persuasions than myself, because it's always fun to get on an Indian chef making Indian food, a Japanese chef making Japanese food, but also with the idea that these have to be quick and easy weeknight entrees.
What's the mission of that? In other words, if somebody comes up to you and they say, Sara, I love your show on PBS because fill in the blank.
Well, what they used to say, and it really made my day, is you got me cooking or you got me cooking again. So it's making it so simple that anybody feels like they can do it. But moreover, it's back to family meal. That is my mission. That is absolutely my mission, is to get everybody, whether it's you and your dog, let's say you're a single person, or it's just you deserve to cook yourself a nice meal and to sit down at the end of the day and reflect. So that is absolutely my mission. And secondarily, to mainly use fresh ingredients. I mean, one of the reasons this country is so obese is because of processed and fast food. And so basically, if you start with, I don't want to say raw. I mean, I'm not against a rotisserie chicken or chopped up vegetables. You're just going to be eating more healthy. It's just so much better for you.
Let's go back to the Food Network, because you and I worked there. I was at the Food Network from '94 to 2002. You were there a longer period of time even than I was. you ended up being canceled, whatever term we want to use, fired.
I use the H word. You're on hiatus.
You're on hiatus
But it's
forever.
really the C word,
Yeah.
canceled.
So, give me your reaction to being canceled, because you were canceled at the height of popularity.
Well, it wasn't the height of popularity, but they could have reused me,
Yeah.
but they were changing their demographic, and they were going to 15 to 35-year-old males, and my audience was more of a female working mom kind of thing. And so they just didn't want to rethink me or do anything with me. You know, Bill, it's the funniest thing, and you and I have talked about this before. I had so many people be discovered on my show who then went on to have their own shows. And I always said to them, keep your day job. Keep your day job. Don't let this go to your head. Don't think this is your new life. I saw so many of them come and go, and I thought to myself, I'm going to be fine. I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated.
Tell me about it.
Well,
the emotional.
I felt like rejected. I was like, I lost my sense of self. I was a solid person. I knew who I was. I never meant to be on TV. By the way, that was a complete fluke. I was first and foremost a chef, and then when I had kids, I was first and foremost a mother, and then I did this show, and then I became a TV celebrity chef, and I guess I believed it. So when it went away, I was like, who am I? And I started, obviously I was still a mom, and obviously I was still a chef, but that didn't seem as important. So I started seeing it as a therapist, and she really helped me a lot. But you know what? I felt like now I've come out of it. It's not just because of the public television show, although that helped enormously. But I'm not that I've ever lost anybody that close to me. My parents are still living. My siblings are still living. But I think it's like a death, and you have to mourn, and it takes a period of time. You know, I've met other people who've gone through devastating rejections or been fired from their jobs. And it's crazy to just think you're going to bounce back. You just have to decide. You're going to try to carry on. You're going to do the best you can, but time has to pass.
Two things. What was the major revelation through therapy that helped you?
Geez, she just helped me to focus on who I was before I went to the Food Network. Even though I could just say, oh, I'm a chef and a mother, she just really tried to get me to hone in on that and the good things that I'd done in that direction, in that department, and also to really hone in on who I am, which had a lot to do with integrity, and just to remember that's who I was, and that in terms of where the Food Network was going, that wouldn't have been right for me, what they're doing. And they're very different now. It's not me. It's what it is. It's fine, but it's not me.
Now, the second thing is, did you then develop a resolve, like, I'm going to show them, I'm going to get back on television, this is very important to me, to re-establish myself?
Well, you know, Bill, it's very funny, because I worked with Julia Child for years. And starting in 1978 and 79 on Julia Child and More Company. And every time I'd see her throughout those years, she'd say to me, oh, dearie, you know, as long as you're on TV, they remember you, but as soon as you're off, they forget. And I was like, oh, that's ridiculous, Julia. You know, how can anybody ever forget you? But finally, by the time it happened to me, I thought, she got a point there. And for her, she had a point there too. I mean, to this day, she's passed away, I forget if it's 3-4 years ago, but now you talk to young people, they have no idea who she is. I'm like, oh my God, that's horrifying, because to me, she was the first and the most important. But likewise, I thought the Food Network ended my contract in 2005. We still taped in 2005, and then they aired my show. They're still airing right now, but not much. But for at least a year, it was on 7 days a week. I expected the next year would go off. But I still started falling off the radar screen because I wasn't the hottest thing since sliced bread.
You could feel it slowly slipping from your grasp.
Slipping.
So what did you rely on? I mean, what was your resolve?
Well, first of all, I decided, yes, I'm going to do everything I can to get back on TV. Worked with my agent to try to do it network-wise, and that wasn't happening. So I said, okay, I'm going to go the public television route. I had went left slightly. I had a partner and a different idea for a show, and realized we were not good partners. So even though we were close, I said, I can't do, you have to have a good partner. You have to feel comfortable in your job. So I wasted 2 years with her, got a new partner, and then it took us another year to get this show. But in the meantime, I did other things. I said, okay, if I'm not going to be on TV, I have to be out there. So I hooked up with a mutual friend of ours and went out and started doing this mall tour circuit, which meant that I could go around from city to city. I think the first year I did 5, the second year I
Super
did 10.
Chefs Live.
Super
Right.
Chefs Live, Simon Mall Super Chefs Live.
Right.
And that, I think, really helped to keep me out there. And then every city we'd go to, there'd usually be some sort of press, maybe there'd be an interview, maybe there'd be a write-up. So I did the Grassroots thing. And there's nothing wrong about the Grassroots thing. When you think about one of the most famous chefs today, that's Jacques Pepin. Now, granted, he's been on public television probably for 10 years, but how did he get there? He went around doing cooking demos in all the small cooking schools around the country and just really built up a name slowly and grassroots and is totally beloved. So there's nothing wrong with doing the small thing.
Let's get to pure advice.
Yeah.
I can guarantee someone is watching us right now who has been fired, downsized, they're home, they wish they were working, they may have to reinvent themselves. Advice for that person about the first couple steps that they need to take in terms of action and how they need to feel about themselves.
Well, if you can afford to see a therapist, find the right one. I think it's really helpful because it's not just a rejection, the job rejected you. You feel totally rejected as a human being. So you have to go back and figure out who you are and feel better about yourself. And to that end, maybe there's some other things you should do for yourself aside from the therapist. Like maybe it's time to really exercise. Maybe it's time to read those books you've been meaning to read or go take that painting class. Do anything you can to make yourself feel better about yourself. Rely on your friends. Network. All of that is very important. And then something you have to actively think about what your brand is. And that's very hard for people. If it doesn't come to you naturally. But you have to figure out, what do you have to offer? What is it that you do really well? As a matter of fact, that's how I ended up on TV to begin with, or ended up being much more relaxed. I was getting, the first time around, I was getting media training, and I was awful. And we were training for 2 days, and about a day and a half into it, the guy who was training me said, because I would just be like, dead in front of the camera, said to me, okay, Sara, there's got to be some reason you should be the next Julia Child. And that pissed me off, because I was like, there will never be another Julia Child. Don't say that. I'm not going to be Julia Child. He said, okay, there's got to be something that you offer that is very uniquely you. And I thought, and everybody should do this, whether they've been rejected or they're starting the first time. Think about what you do really well. And I knew what I did really well. I knew I was a good chef, but that was not going to work on TV. I knew I was a really good teacher. I was an excellent teacher, because I taught at a cooking school here in New York, and my students loved me. And I loved teaching. I loved the whole process. And actually, I was supposed to be a teacher growing up. I tutored and read all those books, How Children Learn, Why Children Fail. So as soon as he said that, I was like, yes, I'm a teacher. And it helped to make the camera go away, because that was the problem. You're looking at a camera, you don't see people, can't get past it. You feel all uptight. So once I decided I was a teacher, it gave me wings.
Big breakthrough.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk food. There are 3 things that I want to get into. I'd like you to give advice, pure and simple advice on healthy shopping, healthy cooking, healthy eating habits.
Okay. Well, healthy shopping can be expensive because fish and produce can be expensive. What we all feel these days in the food industry is that organic is great, but even better is local and seasonal. So if you can afford to go to the farmer's market, do. There's a new trend, which is to join CSAs, which is Community Supported Agriculture. There, you can go online and type that in, and you will find a local a place to sign up in most areas.
Community supported agriculture. Wonderful.
And what that is you invest money in a local farm in the beginning of the season, usually January, February. You give X amount of dollars. In my case, I think it was for a full season, it was $300. And then that gives, everybody does that. So then the farmer takes that money, buys the supplies, plants the food, and for the rest of the summer, usually it kicks in starting in June, depending on where you live, once a week, you go and you pick up your share.
Great
So
idea.
if the farmer had a good day or a good week, you'll get more. If it's been bad, you'll get less. And you have no pick over what you get. It's what they grow. And the advantage to it, besides the obvious advantage that it's affordable, it's all summer, is that you end up getting things you've never known how to cook before. Like the first time I ever cooked fresh edamame, they were on the stem. I was like, what the heck is this? And I learned, because they will give you a flyer that teaches you how to cook the stuff. And plus, it has the added advantage that you meet other people. It's a community sort of activity, you have to give some time back. So in my case, I had to give 3 afternoons in the season. But the season goes from early June all the way till a week before November. And it's extraordinary stuff. So that's one way to get your produce cheaply. Certainly you can work with the produce from the supermarket. Fish is a great option. It is rather expensive, but at least try to get that once a week. And then I'm a strong believer in having a very well-stocked pantry, which, I know when the anti-carb people say don't eat any more pasta. You can get very good quality whole wheat pasta now. And they also say, and I don't quite understand this from a scientific point of view, if you don't overcook your pasta, your dried pasta, it's got more nutrition. But think about all the vegetables you can pack into a pasta dish. So I'm a strong believer in having good pasta, good grains in your cupboard, and then you can sort of dress it up with all sorts of vegetables. We eat way too much protein in this country. Way too much
I'm
protein.
To blame there partly. Healthy cooking. Just advice on things to do that are healthy and things to avoid that are unhealthy when you're making food.
Well, some of it's really no-brainer. I mean, if you're making a sauce, make a vegetable sauce versus a cream sauce. Make a tomato sauce versus a cream sauce. Thicken things. I use beans a lot. Beans are really, really healthy for you. When I say beans, I don't mean green beans. Green beans are fine too. I'm talking about kidney, white, chickpeas. I keep them in my pantry all the time because they can make a great sauce. You add them to, say, your pasta or your pasta sauce, and then you just throw a little bit into a blender and puree it, and they'll make it really creamy. You can get your creaminess by pureeing vegetables as opposed to by adding cream or by thickening with a roux. So that's something I do a lot. Vinaigrettes make a great sauce for anything, and vinaigrettes tend to be rather light. Let me think of some of the other things that we do.
Frying.
Well, don't fry, oven bake. So if you want something crispy, just dip it into, say, egg white and then to panko breadcrumbs and put it in a high heat oven, and that's a way to get it crispy without deep frying. Nonstick pans are good, but you have to be careful not to heat them too high because they give off toxic fumes. So just make sure you have some oil in the pan and don't heat it too high. But other than that, they work pretty well.
How about the cooking of meat that might be fatty to begin with, letting the fat drain, trimming the fat?
Well, the thing is, if you're going to cook fatty meat, I would say cook fatty meat, enjoy fatty meat, and just have a smaller portion. Other than that, reach for leaner meat and don't overcook it. So, for example, one of my favorite cuts of pork is pork tenderloin. Not pork loin, pork tenderloin. But if you overcook it, it will be dry as possibly, it's just awful. But if you cook it and the pork board would not approve, okay? Don't tell the pork board I told you. Trichinosis is killed at 138. So most chefs cook their pork to 140, their lean pork, and then you let it rest. It goes up to 145. But it will be perfect and juicy and flavorful and wonderful. If you're going to cook meat that you want to be lean, you want to take a flank steak and cook it rare and slice it really, really thin. So either take the fatty cuts and enjoy them for what they are, or take the lean cuts and don't overcook them and just have a smaller portion.
How about eating habits? And that would be meaning at home and on the road and in restaurants, ways to eat more healthily and still totally enjoy what you're...
Right. Well, it's funny. One of my favorite books, I don't know if you're familiar with it, is a book by Brian Weinsick called Mindless Eating. It is such a fun book, and it's so interesting. And he sort of says, if you do just a few things, you're going to lose weight without even knowing it. You can gain weight without even knowing it, but you can lose weight. So one thing, stop eating so fast. I don't mean you do. For example, most people, Americans, sit down and just gobble up their lunch in 10 minutes.
Gobbling is...
So what I do when I do cooking demos is I give everybody an assignment. I say, next time you go decide to eat your lunch, whether you're eating at your desk, which is probably not a good idea, or you're sitting in the cafeteria, look at the clock. Try to extend it by 5 minutes till you can get up till 20 or 25 minutes at least.
Why?
If you eat more slowly, your stomach has time to catch up with your brain. If you left it up to your brain, you would just keep eating, looks good, and your satiation doesn't catch up till it's too late. Americans tend to eat till they're beyond full. In Okinawa, right, where they have the most people who live to 100, I don't remember what that word is, one of the things they all say there, and this is a little hard to wrap your mind around, is they only eat till they're 80% full. Why it's 80 as opposed to 75 or 85, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, stop eating when you're beginning to get full. And then if you eat slowly, it will all catch up with you. But also, smaller portions to begin with. Americans always eat everything on their plate. And the portions are huge, and they go back for seconds. So smaller portions to begin with, no seconds. And one of the things Brian talks about, seems crazy, is to start with a smaller size plate. Don't have huge plates.
Like a spa plate.
Yeah,
sure.
smaller plate. It's all psychological. The things he does, it's just you laugh at yourself thinking about it. But make the right choices. So for example, one of the things that nutritionists are encouraging us to eat more of are nuts. Now in the old days, they'd say, oh, nuts are loaded with fat, don't eat nuts. Now they're saying, yes, eat nuts, they're so good for you. Almonds and walnuts and peanuts and even pistachios. So a snack that I might snack on right now would be 15 almonds. Guess what? They fill me up. You know, right choices. So I used to eat a white English muffin for breakfast with melted cheese on it. Now actually the cheese should keep me filled longer, right?
Because it has fat in it.
Yeah, but what would be far better would be to eat whole grain bread, real whole grain bread, not faux whole grain bread. So you know, eating whole grains really fills you up. Bulking up on vegetables, again, what I learned from Weight Watchers. If you want to have a salad and you're going to have some low-fat dressing and you're maybe going to have a hard-boiled egg in there and maybe there's going to be something else, some protein, then make sure the rest of it is.
Give me your thoughts in abbreviated form on what it's going to take to help turn back childhood obesity. 32% of all children in America are either well overweight or obese, which is a preview of an entire generation. It's going to help.
I think the government really has to get involved. I don't know if the government will get involved because the government has ties to big business. I mean, for years, various governors were trying to ban the, what you could find in the, what do you call it?
Cafeterias?
Well, not just the cafeterias.
Machines?
The machines, in the cafeterias and the machines. And then they would get vetoed. Or somebody would propose, let's get rid of the Coke, let's get rid of the McDonald's, let's get rid of the fast food, and then it would get vetoed because there's obviously connections to big business. So we have to get the government involved to work on that. But I think the biggest problem is education because the segment of the population that's most at risk is the less wealthy part of the population. Fast food is easy and it's cheap. Processed food is easy. I don't know if it's necessarily cheaper, but it's easy. No. But fast food is really a problem. So the parents have to be educated about the issues and have to really understand. I think it could happen in the schoolroom. But they have to know, and they have to know for themselves too, because if they're not eating well, why should the kids? Again, my husband and I grew up not only having family dinner, but there was no soda in either one of our homes. And I don't have it here. Won't have it. Coke is considered a special occasion drink. So you have to start by educating the parents, and then the parents hopefully will educate the children. And one last thing I think would help enormously. There's a great program out of a farm in Milan, Ohio called Veggie U. The farm is the chef's garden. They supply beautiful microgreens to the best chefs in the country, Charlie Trotter and our man at Per Se. But they also decided to give back to the community. So they've gotten grants to run this program. And their goal is to get into every 5th grade classroom. And what it is a total kit. It costs about $325. And they send it to you, and it's a curriculum for a semester. It's a science curriculum. They send you grow lights. They send you plant seeds. They send you everything you need to grow a garden with the kids, plus all these questionnaires, plus all this information. So the kids grow a garden from start to finish, and they've seen enormous success with turning the children around about vegetables, because most kids, inner city kids, or most kids, thinks there's 2 vegetables, French fries and ketchup.
Yeah, that's true.
When they're done with this program, they're really excited because they grew it.
There's great taste also in vegetables. One last question. In your life, your long career, in your marriage, and with raising your children, what would you say is the biggest mistake you made and what you learned from it?
Well, it took help from somebody outside to help me realize that I was making this mistake, but it was really consuming me. I'm a short, blonde female in an industry that's, dominated by men. And from the day I started at the Culinary Institute in 1977 till recently. I've always encountered a lot of roadblocks. And it just made me really angry. And it got me so angry that I was almost looking to be dissed, looking to be disrespected.
Becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So
doesn't it?
I was so angry all the time at everybody. And I was angry at the Food Network. They favored the men. I just was so angry. It consumed me. I thought about it every day. And so finally I was doing a lecture. I was part of a panel at the Culinary Institute of America about women in the industry. And I told my story about all the things that had happened to me, which are pretty astonishing, by the way,
Wow.
pretty awful. And there's a career coach there, a woman named Debbie Benedetti. And I thought, because I was unhappy with my job at Gourmet at the time, so so I thought, well, geez, maybe she knows some jobs out there. So I'm going to reach out to her, see if she knows about any jobs in the industry. And she sort of reached out to me too. And in our first conversation, she said to me, "You're very angry, aren't you?" She'd heard me give this speech. And I was like, yikes, that is really bad if it's that obvious. So she worked with me. I had the help of somebody else to recognize what a waste of time that anger was. It ate me up, and it didn't help me get any closer to the prize. I was the sort of person where I would say something sarcastic when I was feeling like I was being dissed. Instead of, if somebody came at me and wasn't offering me what I wanted, I would say something sarcastic or be negative. Instead, I should have figured out, her whole thing was always keep your eye on the prize. What is it you really want, and figure out how you can get there. And certainly by being angry or being negative, you're not going to. Not only did he chase me around the wine cellar on our day off, he wouldn't let me work the line. He wouldn't let me work in the kitchen.
Because you're a woman.
Because I was a woman. I was so angry. I had steam coming out of my ears the whole time. I stuck it out because I knew that I wanted, and I learned a ton. I'm so glad I stuck it out. So I came back. It took me 6 months to tell Julia, and I had nobody to talk to because I was working with his wife, his daughter, his other daughter. How am I going to go tell them your dad, your husband is hitting on me?
Around.
Yeah, So I go back, and it took me 6 months to tell Julia because I thought she'd be horrified that she'd sent me to this terrible situation. And I finally told her, and what did she say? "Oh, dearie, what'd you expect? They're all like that. Get over it." And you know what? I was like, wow. And at the time, I don't know what I thought, but when she passed away, and everybody asked me, what do you think her legacy was? I mean, of course, you could say she was a feminist, but she really wasn't a feminist. She was somebody who knew who she was. And so in this particular situation, she didn't see it as some man who was being a chauvinist or getting in my way. She was like, who the hell cares? You're working at a 2-star restaurant in France? Just go for it, babe. Just do what you need to do. Don't be insulted.
It's good advice.
Yeah.
Really good advice. The whole time I'm talking to you, I'm seeing behind you is this beautiful little kitchen. Did you design this kitchen?
I sure did. It's small like me, Bill, but it's perfect for my needs.
And it has every little touch in it?
Perfect.
Will you take us on a little tour of the kitchen?
Oh, I'd love to.
Okay.
Sara's own family meals are made in a kitchen with some personal touches.
Now, here's the really coolest thing. Okay, garbage pail.
Garbage,
big deal.
right.
Big deal, okay? Cutting board with hole in it. Goes right down to garbage pail.
Excellent.
Isn't that brilliant? These are magnetic spice holders. And look, they're all labeled. They're just right there. I use them a lot more because they're so handy now.
It's been wonderful. Thank you for having us in your home. There's one thing I want to do, kind of take our viewers into Sara Moulton's refrigerator.
No.
Yes,
Oh,
we're going
no,
to see.
but it's not organized,
No, here we
Bill.
go.
Yikes.
Oh my God.
Look at that.
I have not seen this much
it's
food in the
not usually-
refrigerator since I was 12 years old.
Oh, it's always much neater than
Look
that.
at this, everything.
I don't know what happened here.
Anyway, let's
Yeah.
have a little trip inside. From deep inside Sara Moulton's
It's a mess.
refrigerator. This is
It's a
Bill
mess.
Boggs for my generation. Where do I start? Let's see.
How about some wine?
Yeah, let's start with the wine.